Can I welcome this working group and welcome members? Before we start, I'm just going to ask everyone in the room to introduce themselves for the benefit of those who are online. So I'm Peter Black. I'm the chair of this working group. I'm going to go to Rachel next.
Rachel Percival, Scrutiny Officer.
And my name is Councillor Michael Locke, and I'm the Councillor for Sketty.
Sarah Lackenby, I'm Head of Digital and Customer Services.
Liz Shellard, I'm the Web Manager for the Council.
Red button.
Oh, this one, yeah. Jay Jenkins, Councillor for Gowerton Ward.
Thank you, everybody. Right, we're going to start off apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Chris Holly and Lyndon Jones. I don't know if we've had any apologies anyone's aware of. No? Okay. And then disclosures of, we've also had an apology of Councillor Andrea Lewis as well. So anything which is the cabinet member should be answered, we'll put in the letter for her to respond on that. Any disclosures of interest at all? No. And then prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. We have had no public questions. So we're going to go straight on to the main item, which is the customer contact report. And welcome Sarah Lackenby and Liz Shellard. Sarah's the Head of Digital and Customer Services. Liz is the Web Development Manager. And would you like to introduce the report, please, Sarah? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to start with the summary at paragraph 1.2, interestingly, how we've seen quite a change in the way that residents and businesses access services since the pandemic, much more towards web and email, and with 90% accessing services via a smartphone compared to about 40% before the pandemic. New developments on the website means people are accessing information much quicker as well with less clicks. Throughout the report, we make the distinction between the different types of access channels, but particularly different call centres as well. We've got for telephone contact. Obviously, the largest volume comes through the corporate call centre, but there are also all other call centres across the council dedicated to specific services, and 2.1 lists the services provided by those. Abandoned calls on the telephone are impacted by when we have very high demand at peak times of day. Also specific periodic events. So if we get flooding or if there's a waste vehicle breakdown or something like that, then we inevitably will get high volume of calls all at once. We also do services that periodically do experience some staff sickness. Obviously, we can't staff up for to allow for that additional capacity. So where staff are sick or if we have a lot of annual leave, albeit that is very well managed, then that can impact on the abandoned calls. Some services as well have been unable to fill vacancies, which has been quite a challenge. And we also just the fact that abandoned calls can sometimes be positive in that we have been trying to put more recorded messages on so that, for example, if a collection's been missed or there is flooding we're aware of in a road or various other events that might happen, we've been putting not only stuff out on the web, but also on the phone messages so that if people do ring, then once they've heard the message and they know what action we're taking, then they will hang up. So to a certain extent, there is an element of positive abandon with that as well. You also see in the report we have a plan of actions to improve the abandoned calls. So we have been reviewing all the phone numbers across the council, both direct dials and across all the contact centres. That's been a full review, and I can provide more of that later. Messages in the queues, as I say, also wrap up call reasons. So when in the corporate call centre, when we have taken a call, we'll put in the wrap-up call reason why the resident was calling us, and that gives us an indication if there's been any failure demand. So are people ringing because they've not had a service, or are they ringing because they've not heard from somebody? So then we can follow that up to try and reduce more calls later. We're trying to introduce voicemails for some services where appropriate. It's not always that easy for voicemails in all services because then there's just a backlog of voicemails to check. So it's where it's appropriate. And we are already starting to see some improvement in abandoned calls this month, but we're hoping with further work that we're doing, that's going to improve in the coming months and first quarter of the new financial year. With regard to the online particularly, the new website was launched in August 2021, and that has made a significant difference. People are finding information much quicker and easier, as I said earlier, especially with the new Grand Theatre website being separate, as people were often clicking around the website previously to find events and Grand Theatre performances. Visitor numbers are still increasing, so you'll see in the report we talk about, and there's the chart, people finding information with less clicks, but we are seeing visitor numbers still increasing despite the fact that we have actually got some separate websites for certain areas. And section 4 talks about the face-to-face contact, obviously with the new Eastover initiative. This will be a completely different offering to what we currently do in the Civic Centre. It'll have several organisations in the building, including the library, hosted there, and it'll be much more accessible as a city centre location as well for the public. Digital inclusion work has developed since the previous strategic framework was developed prior to the pandemic, and I'm hoping Lee Cambiel will be able to join us today to talk more about this and answer any further questions that councillors may have. There is a digital inclusion action plan on the back of the Audit Wales report. This is particularly being managed now by the Tackling Poverty Service, overseen by the Scrutiny Digital Inclusion Working Group. But just to add that obviously for digital inclusion, digital channels are supported by telephone and face-to-face contact. So I can elaborate that further when we come on to some of the questions, but very much it's not just about digital only. And there are some areas where there are digital only channels. So if people want to apply for a blue badge, it is only online. So obviously customer services will help residents both over the phone and face to face in completing that. But there's no other option, unfortunately, from UK government. Section 6 provides an overview of the digital transformation programme to deliver the strategic goals in the digital strategy 2023 to 28. Particularly, we've got the Improving Customer Access programme projects in that. We've also recently developed the new customer charter and service standards so that residents and businesses know what level of service to expect when they contact the council. And we're developing a customer contact strategic framework as well to expand on that, particularly on the service standards about the different access channels and how people can access. So very happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think the blue badges is Welsh Government, isn't it, as opposed to UK Government?
Sorry, Welsh Government. Sorry, yes, my apologies. Yeah, yes.
It's a devolved issue. Okay, I've got a couple of questions from Lyndon Jones, who sent us apologies, so I'll start off with those. Lyndon says a common issue with the phone system is that once calls go through to the relevant department, you're unable to get through. In addition, face-to-face meetings with officers are less available due to remote working. And can anything be done to improve phone and in-person contact with officers? He says there seems to be an over-reliance on digital communication.
Yeah, so we've got around 720 directory entries that we've been reviewing since last June 2023. We found there was about 245 obsolete directory entries which have been deleted. We're still just, there's only 60 remaining to check now. We've been asking heads of service and their deputies to confirm the phone number's correct, that it's live and monitored for calls relating to that service as well. So we're double checking all of those numbers, and so hopefully we should have that completed very soon. We did send some reminders as well to officers in November, just to make sure that remind everybody to keep their directory records up to date. They can do that online. So we've been sending out regular reminders. And once calls are forwarded via the switchboard, the difficulty is customer services at that point don't have any control over officer responses. So what we're trying to do, if it goes through the automated switchboard, we can monitor it through the system as to what happened to it, and we can track it. But if it goes out to, if it's maybe directed to a mobile, or if it's then goes to an answering machine, we don't know then if obviously that was picked up at the end. So that is relying us more on having those conversations with departments to make sure that things are being picked up. We also find that staff in business areas will often not just be sitting waiting for calls as well. So obviously in the call centres, that's a dedicated job for someone. But where you've got direct dial out to officers, they're generally doing many tasks. They might also be talking to residents and face to face, so they may not be able to pick up calls straight away. Again, we've got officers out in services multitasking on a range of many tasks, so they may, for the direct dial that is, they may not be able to take the call immediately, but that's where it may then go to a voicemail.
I think you mentioned the blue badges. I think the other issue is residents parking. Because I know a number of people who've struggled with the online stuff and haven't been able to get through to the department to help. I've often had to email the person in charge and say, can you bring this person back? So I think that's an issue there as well. Yeah, I'm going to go to Leslie's question now, because actually it seems quite relevant to follow up on what we just had, and then I'll come back to Lyndon's second question. Leslie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, following on from the question that Lyndon has raised, are we sure that officers are all getting the messages through to them? Because there has been quite a few residents have said they've called in, but they've not been given, the particular officer hasn't gone back. And on the back of that, there's also the issue, are phones where officers are now working remotely, are they being correctly diverted, their landlines in work, to their mobile phones? Thanks.
Yes, so as I said, yes, in the previous question, yes, if it's diverted to a mobile phone, then it may go to mobile answering machine. We do have messages that we send out asking people to test that they've got the right number diverted, but also that it is a current mobile. If there's been any change of staff, and staff might have changed in terms of mobile phones as well, we're just double checking that as well to make sure that anything that was potentially diverted from their office when they were there, because obviously office arrangements have changed for everyone, making sure that that's, whatever those arrangements were, double checking that that's all there. So on the back of that, we are reminding everyone to do that. We do have one of the systems we've got is it doesn't necessarily show when messages are stored. So in the report, obviously, where I talk about the new Improving Customer Access project, we're changing a lot of the technology. One of the current limitations of one of the pieces of technology is it doesn't tell you when you've got a message. So it relies on officers regularly checking whether they've got messages rather than it telling you you've got a message, which isn't necessarily helpful. But that will change imminently when we change the new systems as part of that project. So I think that'll be more helpful. But definitely if it's diverting to a mobile and there's a mobile message, then obviously people will get a notification they've got a message. So that should help.
Thanks. I think I'm grateful that you're following up on phone numbers, because that obviously is a big issue. If officers don't make sure that they've got the right phone number for people to access, then obviously that doesn't help remotely. So I'm very pleased that you're following up, and I feel fairly reassured, particularly the more you liaise directly with departments and remind them of these things, I think the more helpful that will be. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Leslie. I have a vague recollection that a few years ago we were talking about phones being diverted to people's computers or via Teams or something like that. Is that active? Is that working?
No, that's part of the Improving Customer
Right.
Access. So again, using more of our existing Microsoft technologies to be able to, which is obviously going to be easier for the staff as well, because people are used to using that now. So we're expanding some of that technology to be able to be able to deal with residents exactly through your computer. So but that's coming. That's not with us just yet.
Would that happen automatically, or would they have to set that up to say I'm working from home today and set that up? Or
there'll be an element of people being able to set up, and there'll be an element of, depends on whether you're going to be in a call center or whether you're taking direct dial calls and you've got other duties. So we're talking about that now with different services, because there won't be one size fits all. So it means then that we can tailor it to the needs of different services and the residents they serve, because it's slightly different for everybody.
And what's the timescale to get this new software in place?
That's going to be around 18 months, because we have got to do a full procurement, and we've also got to then do a full implementation across many different services. So the improving customer access, it obviously will be going, you know, it's not going to all come in 18 months. It'll be over time, over that 18 months, but it will take some time, because there's quite a procurement exercise to go through at the beginning.
Okay. Right, Lyndon's second question regarding the automated switchboard. The report refers to 23% of calls containing grammar not known and will be investigated. He says, why has this issue occurred? What are the timescales for this? I hope it's adapted for a Welsh accent.
Yes, we've been looking at that as well. It's generally where people go, or there might be a lot of background noise if they're in a busy street and there's traffic behind. It distorts the audio, and so it confuses the system. So that's the majority of them. Sometimes we have where people can't remember necessarily the exact surname of an officer as well. So it might get slightly garbled, and so we listen to each one. It's recorded and we research each one. So we're looking at how we can change the phonetics all the time and fine tune it to make it more accurate.
So this refers to messages being left which can't be understood. A problem which I experienced as a councillor, I have to say.
This is the automated switchboard.
Right. So it's
So,
when
yes.
you leave, yeah.
Yeah. So what happens with the automated?
Yeah.
So somebody phones up and asks for, say, waste and recycling. The system will say, are you wanting waste and recycling? You'd say yes. Or if they say, did you want legal or did you want HR? You say, no, didn't want that. And then it'll say again what you want. So it takes you through a process, but then it also gives you the opportunity to speak to someone. So we do have people switchboard operators as well. So there's no danger of people just getting lost in a loop of the technology where they can't get out of that. People can jump out of that straight away at any point and talk to someone, and the switchboard then can put them through to the department as well. But this just, obviously it's very quick if the system immediately recognizes what you need and gets you straight through, then obviously that's quicker, because we do get a very high volume of switchboard calls. So
sounds very dystopian. I have to say those switchboards are my top 5 hates, because I always end up screaming yes at them because they never understand what I'm saying. But I can imagine a lot of people would not like. I mean, there's an alternative is where you just press buttons. Do people? Are we looked at that, or is from reason we prefer this? Or
you can, yes, and we can keep the we try and keep the list short as well. You know, it's important to keep them short and try and get people through as quickly as we can. So we have definitely tried not to make it you know, a whole difficult long list of menus or anything like that. We've tried to get, or you can jump straight away to talk to someone, as I say. So yes.
Okay, right. Internal telephone directory. You've already said you're reviewing that. Job descriptions, phone numbers, I've come across not always correct, particularly where people move jobs and they don't. I emailed someone, said I've moved this, but it says this in your job description. I mean, obviously, when someone moves a job, there's a process to go through. Shouldn't it be automatic? They also update the internal directory as part of that straight away?
Yes, it's part of the process that we're looking at, so that everything will update everywhere, including on the internal email directory as well as on the phone directory. So we are looking at that to see if we can get everything automatically updated. Some of that we might be able to do linking back to the HR process.
Yeah.
So as soon as it's triggered from the HR process and then automatically throughout the organisation. So we're looking at that as well.
And my other hate is when officers don't put out of office messages on their email, because you know I don't mind. If I email an officer and there's no out of office, I'm expecting them to pick it up fairly quickly. If they say an out of office message, I'll be back on such and such a date. Great, I won't expect to reply to them. But then also you get people who just say I'm off leave, but don't give them an expected date. They just use a generic one. So I think there may be a need to look at out of office messages and try to get some sort of standard so that people understand A, that the officer is not there, and B, when the officer will be back. because that can be very frustrating for not just councillors, but I think for the public who are emailing officers as well.
Yes, we are actually reviewing out of office messages at the moment, and looking at both not having out of the dates on out of office for external messages, but reminding staff that that is important for internal messages.
Yeah.
And also things like, you know, Welsh language and giving them some suggested forms of words. So that's something that's just being reviewed now, and we're just getting it translated. So that should that reminder should go out in the next week or so.
Yeah, because you can have separate messages for internal and external. So I mean, the internal one I think should give a date, but the external one should say, go to this officer instead, and actually name someone to go to. I've had that in the past where the officer they've directed to is also on leave, which is also very frustrating. But you know, that happens, doesn't it, Mike?
Yes, another thing which I find on this particular point a bit frustrating in a minor sense is when officers leave their previous message there. So you email an officer at the end of January, and the message says, I won't be available between the 22nd of December and the 29th of December last year.
I'll make sure that that gets in the reminder as well. Thank you.
I've had officers which are a year old. Leslie.
Yeah, sorry, can I go back to the automated system? Just a quickie from a person who has minor hearing issues. When you do messages, when you say call 1 and then call 2 and 3, can you just bear in mind that 2 and 3 on the phone can sound very similar? And just make sure that those numbers are very clearly spoken, because I've fallen foul of that quite a few times in the past. Thank you.
Both noted that. Thank you. Okay, right. Paragraph 2.5 discusses an increase in abandoned calls with 4 bullet points for improvement. What are the timescales for those targets, please?
So the actions are already underway. The aim of implementing those ones by the end of March, and it's then hoped that we'll see those improvements in the next few months and by Q1 of the next financial year. So they're all immediate actions, those that we're taking straight away. There are other things as a wider action plan as well, and obviously the improving customer access project, but those in particular we're trying to get done immediately.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Chris Evans, who is not present. So he says, what's the overall target for abandoned calls? For example, to reduce them to 30% over the next 2 years or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so the target will vary across the different call centres, and we're working with heads of service on that at the moment. But in terms of the corporate call centre, we are aiming to reduce the abandoned calls below 20% by the end of March, assuming capacity remains the same. Obviously, if the call centre is hit by sickness or staff leave, then that will obviously impact our abandoned calls until we can recruit. But that the target is 20% by the end of March.
Okay. Michael.
Right. My question is, have the council considered a phone queue system that informs the caller where they are in the queue? This will give an indication of how long the wait might be.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one of the actions that we've been doing to try and improve performance. So it's currently live on the environmental health line already. We've put that live just recently on the 635 600 line. It's going to be added to other services as part of the planned updates in the coming months. And it's also part of the Improving Customer Access project for the new technology we're trying to bring in as well.
Right, fine. Thank you very much.
I was going to say the environmental line is one you desperately need is on. I tend to email them anyway. Di, yes.
Yeah, you mentioned that sickness affects it. What's your percentage short-term sick and long-term sick at the moment, please?
I'll have to come back to you on the exact figures, but we are we have a couple of staff off on long-term sick at the moment, and short-term sick is actually quite low. So we're not doing too badly with sickness at the moment, has to be said. But I can come back to you with the exact percentages.
Okay. So obviously a lot of frustration with the call system. Do you have many complaints about the actual system itself from the public, frustration?
Actually, we don't have very many, it has to be said. I mean, obviously, if I hear any complaints via councillors, what we try and do is if there's somebody who's had a difficult, do you mean the automated switchboard?
Yeah,
particularly?
about it,
Yeah.
yeah.
If we have a complaint via a councillor, somebody's found it very difficult, if we can get their contact details and their phone number, we're able to track it through the system to see what their experience was and where it went wrong, and then we're able to ring that customer back and talk to them about it. But we're generally speaking, in terms of getting formal complaints through, no, we get very few.
Okay, thank you.
To be honest, if I get a complaint from someone not being able to get through, I'll just email the relevant officer and get that, rather than actually refer back to the automated switchboard. And most of those are in terms of parking permits and parking tickets. Yeah.
I mean, just on the parking tickets,
Yeah.
I think with part of that is the process, because
Yeah.
it's calls aren't taken around parking tickets.
No, I know that, yeah.
People are either appealing or paying, and I think that's one of the things that we're talking to the head of service about at the moment,
Yeah.
in terms of resident access on that.
Well, as a councillor, if you go to the officer on a parking ticket, they say you shouldn't be involved in this, go through the process. They need to go through the appeal process because it's a quasi judicial process or whatever. So, but I mean, people trying to ring that department often can't get through. So that's when most of my complaints about not being able to get through. So yeah, anyway, Di, you've got question 8 as well.
My question is, could the council consider the option of giving callers a callback option once they've waited a certain length of time in a queue, for example, 15 minutes?
Yes, and this requirement's in scope for the new telephony system, which we're bringing in at the end of 24. So housing benefits and council tax contact centres have specifically requested that. The ability for residents to reserve their spot in the queue, and then the system to call customers back when they reach the end of the queue. And it doesn't, that process as well doesn't necessarily increase the need for additional staff. It's just being able to manage where people were in the queue anyway. So it's not as if we have to then do a whole load of callbacks. At the end of the day, the system would allow it. So yes, it's definitely what we're including as part of the scope for the new system.
Assuming they call them back, of course. Yeah, okay. I got another question from Chris Evans here. Councillors often receive emails that Jabber is down. Does this mean the phone system is not fit for purpose? I'm assuming just updating software.
Yes, and I think this
Yeah.
was in a particular period in 2022 and early 23 when the system was quite unstable, because we were transitioning between 2 different back office systems, and it was causing some problems with Jabber at that point. But since then, there's been very few outages. Actually, it's actually got a lot better. You do obviously sometimes see messages where it's coming down, but that's planned, because obviously we have to do planned upgrades and security updates and apply patches and things to the software, which happens fairly regularly. But we usually give notice so that people can activate business continuity plans, and we try and do as much of that out of hours that we can. But it's, because the telephony is voice over IP, it's not a simple analog line, so it has to be done digitally. So.
Okay, right. I think the other next question, are there any targets in place for officers to respond to emails and website referrals? The public don't always know it's been picked up. A response can't save a follow-up phone call in times.
Yes, so we're going to issue some reminders about this, but this is about the new service standard.
Yeah.
So actually, the general guidance is that all mailboxes should have automated responses on them. And in there also, you can put in there then the service standard for delivery. So twofold. One, the resident gets confirmation that their email's been received, and secondly, it then says the service standard. So if it's, say, 5 days or 6 days, then the resident knows that that's how long it might take, and then hopefully, you know, they won't call before then because they know that. I mean, if it's beyond that, then fair enough, that might generate a follow-up, but that's the service standard set, and so that's a reminder. So hopefully we'll send out a reminder to officers to make sure that all of the automated responses are on all of the mailboxes.
Yeah, I think this would be particularly useful on the website. When you fill in one of the forms on the website, getting a response back saying your complaint has been received, it should be dealt with within X number of days. That would be very useful. I know one frustration, I mean, I have this with public lighting, is that public lighting is absolutely excellent, I have to say, but often you send a message to public lighting, this light is out of order, and nothing seems to have happened. Now, I would just email the officer, say what's going on, but the public think, well, why haven't they responded to that? And often it's an underground fault. You know, so there are issues where if they know it's got to be dealt with within, say, 5 days, then they can say, well, it hasn't been dealt with, I'm going to send another message. At that point, they need to say, well, this is what the problem is. So often you don't get that communication coming back. Yeah. So I think, you know, an automated response on all the forms would be quite useful. Yeah.
Just
Yes, yeah.
you're probably going to say the same thing here, but just to follow up. Yeah, I mean, initially the automated mailboxes, but obviously when we get to the Swansea account work, ideally, and it's going to take time to get all the services in there, but residents will be able to log in, and when they log in a request, they'll be able to see the progress of it, and officers will be able to then respond and put messages into the system to be able to inform the resident where things are. Now, obviously, this is going to take many years to get all the services on, but that's definitely the vision of what we're trying to do with it.
I'm not sure that you're going to get many residents actually setting up an account. I mean, I set up an account because I wanted to take stuff to the tip. I set up an account with Wirral Council because I need to get my mother's blue badge sorted out. So there are things where you have to set an account and you have to do that. But other times, most of them will just go onto the website. So I think that's going to be an issue. If you're relying on people setting up an account, that could be an issue in terms of numbers.
So the idea there, we're not going to force anybody to set up an
No.
account. You know, obviously that's completely against what we want to be doing. But the natural advantages of being able to set up an account, it won't take them off the website. It'll be part of the website and be a natural part of the process. So it'll invite people at the end of a form if they want to put in a password. It's not going to force them to do it.
I understand that. Yeah.
But they'll some of the benefits, as Sarah said, they'll be able to actually see where their process, where their query is in the process, and see the answer and see their bookings and things if they've booked a lifelong learning course, for example, and also have their forms auto filled, so that should save them some time. But you know, it's completely up to the customer.
I understand that. I think I'm just saying, if you're relying on it in terms of statistics and stuff like that, it may be some time before most people do that. Yeah.
We take stats from a variety of different places, so yeah, we're certainly not relying on that, but it'll be part of the overall picture. But thank you for your comment. Yeah,
I think the other point, my next question on face-to-face contact, you put face-to-face contact in the here, but you didn't include the district housing officers. So just wondering, is that an oversight, or are we measuring face-to-face contacts there?
Yes, I mean, I can we can provide you some stats around that as well, if that's helpful. I mean, the area housing officers are open daily, as you know, and opening times are published. Tenants and residents call to access a range of housing and council services, housing advice, appointments with officers, payments of rent and council tax, collect recycling, equipment, signposting. All kinds of things. So if you would like some stats around that. So generally in the district housing officers, the officers there are handling multiple access points, telephone, face-to-face, email. They're doing a whole range of things in there at once as well.
Okay, I think that'd be useful. Yeah, thank you. And then you've got paragraph 6.2, you've got 3 interdependent projects. Just wondering about the timescales for those as well.
Yes, so the Swansea account and the automation projects are already live, but
Yeah.
the aim of this program is to accelerate the rollout of those, as Liz was talking about, as we talked about earlier. Roll out the new functionality and integration with many services across the council over the next 2 years, particularly for the Swansea account and the automation. And then for the new telephone systems, as we talked earlier, in the next 18 months, because of, there's quite a hefty procurement exercise to do up front, as well as a big implementation. So, but they're the main 3 of those ones.
Okay. Leslie, you have the last 3 questions.
Right, my chance to hog the limelight. Right, the first one, in May 21, there was a draft inclusion strategic framework document, and I gave feedback, but I've never seen an updated version.
Yes, we had I think we did an update on progress after the pandemic, and then it's transferred over to the Tackling Poverty team since then. And it's taken a new direction now, obviously following the Audit Wales report, Digital Inclusion in Wales, that was published last year. So the council's refreshed the Tackling Poverty strategy, which is going for public consultation in the coming months. So I don't know if Lee Campbell is on the call. No, but Lee was hoping to come today. Lee is leading on this area of work. There's a huge amount of work going on that. So I can speak to Lee. Be very happy to give more information, or to have a call, I'm sure, to talk about all the work that's going on with that at the moment, if that's helpful.
That would be very helpful. Thanks, Sarah.
If we put that in the letter, could you pass it on to Lee and get him to respond to that, please?
Yeah, that's good. Still with digital inclusion, I'm still always at the back of my mind concerned that whilst a lot more people since COVID have now got online, there are still those who aren't, and there'll still be people in the future who won't, who never will use computers. So I'm still concerned, how are we making sure that people who don't go on and use online forms have got access to good old-fashioned paperwork?
Yeah, so if a resident asks customer services for a paper form, then we can provide one. That's not a problem. Usually what we try and do is help the resident there and then. If it's face-to-face, we'll do it in the e-zone in Civic Centre, or in the different district housing office, or if it's in a library, the staff will then help the resident to fill in the form there and then, or they can have a paper form. Not, as I said earlier, not all applications can be made in paper, like we're talking about blue badges, that is, and bus passes, that they are online only, unfortunately. So what we try and do in customer services, and the libraries also do this, is to help the resident to complete it. So if the resident wants to come down face to face and do it, we'll do an appointment and we'll fill it in with them. They can bring all the information, or we can do it all over the phone. That's not a problem. So we do try and facilitate that as best we can where it is online only. But for our own forms, obviously, yes, we can also print them out. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I suppose that there's a slight catch-22 to all of this, because if people aren't going online, I would wonder, how do they find out they can do it otherwise?
Yes, we do. I mean, we do make residents aware if they call, or if they email, or if they ring us. We do make residents aware that that we do have other channels available.
Okay.
We have also found there's been a very significant increase in people, if not using the online forms on the website, but will email us. I think since the pandemic, there's been quite a rise in everybody using smartphones, and the statistics that we've seen as well, that have come from ONS and others, has been, very high percentage of Swansea residents now do have some access to online, and if not directly themselves, but then via carers, or via other family members, or via other support. And again, talking about the work that the Tackling Poverty team as well are doing in terms of trying to enable people so that people aren't disadvantaged by not being able to get access to online, because it's not just the council services, it's all kinds of things, isn't it? So people getting access to more discounts, access to job applications, all kinds of things which are now only online, not just council services. So again, the Tackling Poverty team are looking at that whole envelope to see how they can support people with online access, because so that people aren't disadvantaged.
Right, thanks. That sounds helpful. My final question: there's the customer charter has recently been finalised. I'm great that we've got a charter. My slight concern is always about making sure all our officers are abiding by that charter. I know that's again, it's a bit of a nebulous question, but can you sort of give me a bit more reassurance that that charter will make a difference?
We're going to be, it will go live officially on the 1st of April. So although it has been approved, then we've got some time between now and the 1st of April to do a whole host of communication internally. So obviously in pulling the charter and the standards together, all heads of service were involved in that. But then the follow-up work to just make sure that all of that is then in place and monitored, we're doing between now and the 1st of April, hence the slightly delayed start date. I know in your question as well, you also talked about the use of the word customer, and yes, we can change that to resident. That's not a problem. But customer was particularly used because it's not just residents, but also reflecting the needs of businesses as well. So it's sort of everyone, not just residents, but the businesses of Swansea as well. So hence the use of customer. Obviously, it is mostly residents, but. Yes, but we have got between now and 1st of April to make sure that everything is in place and communicated as best we can, and then we'll look at the systems for monitoring as well, that which will take slightly longer beyond April. But
Right, oh, that sounds good. So could you use customers and residents? I know it's a mouthful, but nonetheless, it's more accurate. That's all.
yes, absolutely, yeah. That we can take that back and have a look at that for you. Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Anybody else got any questions at all? I think we've been through all the ones which we agreed beforehand. No? Okay, can I thank you both for coming along and answering our questions? We'll put together a letter to you and with the main points and anything which we're still seeking information on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Has anyone got anything in particular they want to put in the letter? I think we've got most of that, haven't we, Rachel? Yeah. So. Yeah, quite a few. Yeah. So if anyone's got anything they want to particularly put in the letter, I think we'll put together a letter and see where we go from there then. Okay, and people can comment on it online. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for coming on, and I declare the meeting closed.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel.